Hello everyone, welcome back once again to the Book of Lying. I hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day. So, the last few episodes have covered some pretty broad subjects as well as things that can come in handy later down the road when you're doing some pretty complicated stuff. This time around we're doing a sort of a case study. So over here I have a circuit that you might recognize from the Spring Realms server because this is a boss abilities with different individual cooldowns. So to start things up we're going to need a few timers. So if we start by getting these up, we have 4 different abilities here, A, B, C, and D. And we can see that they have different starting values on the far right there. The cooldown, unfortunately, has to list the entire UUID of the item, so yeah, just for demonstration purposes, that is there. Now, the cooldown objective, so scoreboard objectives list, we have just this one, which is cooldown, and it is of type dummy, so you can get that by saying /scoreboard objectives add cooldown dummy, and that just gets us a value that we can stick a number in and do whatever we like with. Now, in order to actually use these, it is best if we have an additional global timer. This will determine how frequently the system can actually use one of these abilities, and they're arranged in a specific way so that this is 200 and that is 50 because it will prioritize based on left to right here. So what you want to do ideally is have your big, long delay, massive, destroying kind of abilities closest to the global timer, and the ones that it's going to be using more frequently farthest from it. That just means that it ends up picking the big abilities when it can, but otherwise it prioritizes shorter cooldowns. And the reason we want to have this global cooldown is because it makes it less a case of every single time an ability comes off cooldown it uses it immediately, and it will use them all simultaneously or one immediately after the other, and it's not a great experience for players because it means that they don't really have any time to recognize what's going on, to do any kind of notion of here is where I am going to die, or here is what just happened and what I need to do now, that kind of thing. So you want to have that. But data-wise, these things are pretty straightforward. I've got little clocks on them because that's just sort of my modus operandi, but we've just spawned them in, we've gone by name to give them an actual score in the cooldown, and otherwise they just have this one tag of cool timer. Not because it's a really freaking awesome timer, but just something. So that brings us to the actual timing section. So the first thing that we've got here is to set the basic cooldown of the actual global timer. So whenever that is cool global, and whenever it has the tag of cool timer, and a score of cooldown equals 0, we set its cooldown to 30, which is just sort of our default. From after that, we take every single stand that has the cool timer tag, which is all of these, they just have different names, and has a score of cooldown which is at least 1, so that's score cooldown underscore min equals 1. We subtract 1 from their cooldown score using a scoreboard blaze remove, which means that all of these continue to descend until they hit 0 and then go no further. So that is the basic start. Now what happens in these 4 is where things actually start to pick what ability is going on, and also ensure that only one such ability is actually utilized. So, in the first one here, executing from entity name cool A, which is this one up here, score cooldown equals 0, so score cooldown is no more than 0, can be equal to, can be less than, but no more than 0. Coordinates doesn't really matter terribly much, but then we do entity data on cool global tag cool timer. It's important that we have this particular part, so pay attention to that. We then have score cooldown equals 0, so only when this particular piece is at 0, which it can only happen if it started at 1, so there's no way that it could happen otherwise. We then use our entity data to change the tags of that to just do ability A. So it loses its cool timer tag, but it retains its actual name. So most of this stays perfectly fine. Now the reason that we want to make sure it has the tag of cool timer is because we remove it at the end here, and that means that every successive one, which is doing the exact same thing but for different timers, can no longer find it via this tag, which allows us to pick the first successful ability that is on cooldown. That is where our priority comes in. So if we get this running, we can see the numbers are all descending nicely, and we have Cool D, which is our shortest cooldown, has now hit 0. So with that, we get over to this section. I've colourfully labelled these things so you can have some idea of at least what's going on. And what happens in the first one here is that we just do a little bit of a particle by executing from an entity with do ability D. In this case, this is D, B, C, A at the back there. And then we just execute from Cool D and then do our particles. So just straightforward. If you actually had this being used on a boss, what you would probably do is have a tag on that specific boss entity, and then you would execute from the do ability and then do to the boss and then do all your special stuff. We then just do a little fun stuff to teleport it up, make it sure that we know which one's doing what. And then this is our reset section, these two here. So the first thing that we do is we reset the cooldown of the triggered ability from do ability D, and then we do entity data on do ability D to reset the tag back to cool timer. The reason that we're using entity data here instead of the actual tags commands for the scoreboard is because we can use the entity data on entities to set and remove as many tags as we like. In fact, if we had more than one tag on it initially, then I could use this to set it right back to cool timer 0. And then that just gives us a lot of control and saves us a lot of space and time. So if I add some redstone blocks to here, then we can turn this back on and we can watch this go about its business. Now, the trouble that we can see here is that more or less it's just going to go from left to right over time. It's not really doing anything significant, and the reason for that is that it doesn't have any kind of discrimination. It's just picking the ability based on whether it is off cooldown. Now, what you can do if you're feeling particularly optimistic is you can expand this line out so that every time one of these triggers, we can then actually remove or reset it based on this part here if that particular ability, for whatever reason, doesn't have valid targets. So say, for example, Cool Ability D is a targeted splash damage potion on a nearby player within, say, 6 blocks. To make sure that that doesn't or does happen, what we can do is we can come in here, we can check for any kind of player within 6 blocks that's not in creative mode or spectator mode or whatever have you, and is within 6 blocks of the boss. If there is not, we could use that based on the not we saw in the previous episode, we can remove that tag of do ability D from our global timer and then reset it back to cool timer using exactly this. And that would then mean that we ignore Cool D until it actually has valid targets, which is a bit of a pain for players to enjoy, but it brings another useful dimension to the actual gameplay I've found. But what you're also probably noticing is that this particular model doesn't really give our players any time to realize, oh, he's going to use that ability because he's doing his big stompy animation across the boss room, that kind of thing. And the reason for that is that just we're identifying what ability to use, and then we're using that ability immediately based on this section. We can, however, find ourselves a way to fix this up. So, if I grab a different set of abilities here, so ability 1 is the one I'm looking for here, and we want -5, and I think -9, something like that. Nope, a little bit lower. There we go. So if we grab this and we bring it in, so this is a different version of the same circuit. So over here in the yellow section, we have a warning, and that's just happening by detecting an entity with the do ability A because they don't exist until something rewrites the global timer. And if we detect that, then we send out a little signal to this where we have it say something. So this could be as simplistic as the boss uttering a key phrase that says, oh, they're going to use that ability. And then we've got a little bit of a delay before we actually kick into our previous well, basically identical circuit where it actually happens. Now this is a very short delay of just one full repeater, but you can go into more detail with stuff like this. So you could have a much longer line of repeaters if you were feeling particularly straightforward in this example, or we could have this actually trigger a timer on another section that causes it to actually trigger the ability when it hits 0. That's a bit more complicated, but nonetheless is fun for people to enjoy. And these are, yep, all good. So if we do this, gearing up for ability C, and then up goes ability D, ability B, and then just sort of over and over and over ad infinitum. These timers are very short because they are based strictly on the 20 ticks per second rule. What you could do is have another timer that's just saying, counting down from 20, and then every time it hits 0, it removes 1 from these, and that would give you a per second kind of timer. In this case, our maximum one, cool A, is actually looking for every 10 seconds. But hopefully that is a bit more understandable, and it's straightforward when you break it down to its elements. So we've just got the timer here, and the actual selection there, and then we've just got actually detecting and doing the things, and then the reset, of course, as well. Every time you have a tag system, you have to have a reset. Always remember that. But that is it for today. Let me know in the comments if there's anything in particular you would like me to go over in terms of redstone, be it vanilla redstone, where you're using comparators, repeaters, torches, and the like, or if it's command block redstone, so it might be something that you've seen inside of our Spring Realms series. But other than that, I hope you've all enjoyed, and I shall catch you all next time.